Go ahead, Don.
Politics is supposed to be the field in which public policy is determined. And in a democratic society, which people refer to the United States as, they've been doing it my whole life, referring to it, then those decisions, policy decisions, are supposed to be made democratically. When you have the determinations of policy made at the beginning of the process by, big money, basically, whether it's Democrats or Republicans who are the politicians that will implement those policies, the job becomes then selling policy that the people don't want to people by Madison Avenue techniques, which is where you get identity politics. We are going to do things that are good for big banks. We're going to do things that are good for the military-industrial complex. We're going to do things that are good for the prison industrial complex. We have to sell it to black folks this way, to Hispanic folks this way, to white working class folks this way, etc. In other words, these divisions, quote unquote, that are things that are like in a Madison Avenue playbook, are the things that have to be excited because it's determined already what's going to happen, and all they're doing is trying to tamper your response to it. And so, at the end of the day, when people don't feel anything actualized through public policy discussions, debates, elections, etc., they become frustrated and they start walking away. And what we're seeing happen with the Democratic Party is the logical conclusion of this process, and I think it's terminal. I don't know how they keep missing it. Again, the problem is the a priori decisions policy decisions are made that way. At the beginning, we're doing this, and it gets done. Now the politicians go out and argue over whether it was a good thing or not, although the mechanism by which this thing happened, there are a very small group of people who were making very big policy decisions that transfer large amounts of wealth into their bank accounts and make the rest of us basically have more problems in our daily lives. So the outcome, among the population is going to be, this is another basis for us being dissatisfied. This is bad for me. I have to work longer hours. I don't have as much money. I'm in foreclosure. I'm being evicted. There are millions of people that are in all kinds of distress in the United States. This has been growing since the 1970s, really, and unabated since the mid-late 80s. And there's no remedy offered in the political system. So when politicians come out and start talking about division, for example, you're talking about an adversarial process. Normally, we're trained to think like in courts. An adversarial process is how you do your, find truth. In this case, the adversary is between the people who are making policy and the rest of us, but they have us at each other's throats arguing over what is or isn't true, while all of us are having our wealth transferred to a very small group of people who make those decisions. It's a public relations game, really. It's not a place where policy is made, and that's the problem.
But what's really interesting is that we've had a series of revolts. We've had the Tea Party revolt.
Yeah.
We had the
Occupy. Let's look at the last 25 years and follow two tracks quickly and look at this in relation to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. You had, for example, the globalization thing, where jobs were starting to be offshored in the 80s and 90s. Go to fast forward 1999 in Seattle, I think it was 1999, WTO protests, and a relationship where the unions and the big marches and protests against globalization, basically, the unions ended up joining the marches because their constituents went over the heads of the organizers and said, what these guys are talking about are right. It's my job that's getting shipped overseas. Fast forward to 2008, you have the economic collapse. The people felt so insecure. This is America, okay? They elected the black guy. That was a remarkable moment in American history. And what happened? Nothing. Exactly the same thing continued. Policy didn't change an iota. You come up to 2016, and you have in the Democratic Party Bernie Sanders, who wasn't supposed to get any lift at all. He was supposed to be a distraction, really wins the primary. It was stolen from him. And Donald Trump, who's not even a Republican. Every Republican in that party ran against him, the entire apparatus of both political parties, and he ended up winning that nomination in a cakewalk and the presidency. One last thing on the other track, go back to the 90s, go to L.A. and Rodney King and everything that happened and people going in the streets over that, and come straight up to, Black Lives Matter. And the way that the Democrats relate to that, they try to co-opt it, but in effect, the policies that came out of it, if you look at Bill Clinton with mass incarceration after Rodney King, all the way up to the way people are being treated today in the streets, you have this whole country, huge actual constituencies with real needs that are not being satisfied, and the public relations effort targets them based on these fake, identities that are supposed to correspond to the constituencies, but because they have nothing to do with policies that these constituencies need, they're fake. And this whole thing is kind of collapsing. That's what we're talking about, really.